Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And welcome. Okay, so we have to put this disclaimer out. We've been talking about doing this specific episode for 2 years now, I think. And it's with Joey, our fabulous contributor and part of the show and friend of the show, obviously, and co-worker and all the things. We've been talking about doing this episode for a minute, haven't we?
We have, yes. Thank you. Hello.
That's how I introduce you. They're just a part of the show. Of course they're going to be introduced this way.
Yeah, no, it's been a bit. Has it been 2 years? I feel like I don't know. This is definitely something I've been like, I'll do this at some point.
I feel like me and you specifically talked about it at the bar when I came to New York the first time.
Yeah.
And we were like, we need to have this conversation. So it's been a couple of years.
Yes, no, it has.
Okay, yes, we're teasing this because we also thought that what better way to end Pride Month, but to have a Q&A about the spectrum of gender and what it means to be non-binary. And I guess before we even start this, I guess that we need to know why we're asking you, Joey, to talk about what it means to be non-binary.
No, for sure. I mean, so I identify as non-binary. I think I've spoken about it a couple times on the show. Disclaimer up front, I'm going to talk a lot about my experience and all of that. That being said, there's a lot of people in the world and everybody experiences, gender in a different way. It would be, I would hope that you wouldn't ask like some random man or woman to explain what womanhood or manhood or whatever means to them and assume that that is what it means for the entire population. So much like being non-binary. And as I'm going to get into too, I think like kind of the nature of the concept of being non-binary inherently sort of makes it hard to define because I have like a section in my notes right now that literally just says this is an etymology lesson. But it's like the word non-binary literally means not binary. That means anything that sort of exists outside of the binary, the man-woman binary. So again, I'm going to be talking about my experience. That's not necessarily going to be the case for every single person that identifies as non-binary. People also within the kind of overall non-binary umbrella. I think people don't realize like how broad of a term it really is too. Like it encompasses a lot of different identities. So yeah, that's again my disclaimer. If I say something and you're like, that's not the case for me, then I love that for you. That's amazing. But please don't come after me for speaking my truth too.
I love that. And I think this is one of those things where when you and I are talking about it, because I had to apologize and I did it again not 2 minutes ago, like it's such a newer concept for someone who is an ex-millennial. Like we have kind of a spectrum because I am like in between the Gen X and millennial, and Annie's a true millennial, and you are our Gen Zer. So there's so many like levels in this conversation because I harp on the fact that I'm like, yes, I have understood that I am aging and I no longer am up to date on what is happening in general. And that I love having these types of conversations about the fact that things are now seen as a part of a spectrum instead of being concretely this, and this.
Definitely.
And I think that's one of the beautiful moments where you and I were talking because we had first, of course, met online and we talked to each other through the interwebs. But you and I got to sit and actually have a conversation over a couple of delicious drinks in the bustling city of New York during Halloween time. So it was kind of nice too.
Yeah.
But like you and I sat down and we were talking about it and I had to like be upfront. I'm like, this is so new to me. I still have a hard time like transitioning into they, them because that's such a third person conversation, growing up in the 90s and 80s. But it makes perfect sense. It's just about understanding that things change and things should have been a part of the spectrum. So with that, and knowing that this is your personal story, this should be something that we are talking about on a personal level because that's what makes this conversation important.
Absolutely. And kind of like on that note too, something like one of the points I sort of want to talk about is the fact that, yes, I think people, the terminology is new. Like the word non-binary,
right.
That is new. That I'm not denying. ended up writing something for Trans Day of Visibility, which was back in March, and like posting it on my Instagram, where I talked a little bit about this idea that you hear a lot, I think, from people that are a bit older, that they're like, okay, well, this is like a new idea. The idea itself is not new. The word is new.
Right.
And part of what I think inspired me to like want to talk about this is I'm working on this other show right now called Afterlives. Season 2 is out now, wherever you get your podcast. You should listen. But part of that show is I spent a lot of time talking to queer elders and, you know, also like digging through a lot of queer history archives. The show is about Marsha P. Johnson. I probably should have said that at the top. But anyways, that is, again, so a lot of history research. And something that I kept coming across that I thought was interesting was there were a couple of instances, again, it was kind of mixed because there were some, you know, I do think it's a misconception that all sort of like people over a certain age are just like, this is confusing. I don't understand it. Some people got it right away. Right. A couple of people were clearly sort of struggling with the concept of like pronouns or like being non-binary or taking a non-binary look at gender. But then I would look back at the things that they were talking about or like the work that they had done during kind of their prime in the queer rights movement. And there were these things like androgyny and like gender fluidity that like came up a lot, and kind of the early, like the way that drag, I guess, was viewed in the 70s. That again is sort of changed over the years too. A lot of these words meant different things then than they do now. But yeah, something I kept coming across is I was like, clearly you understand the concept. The word non-binary is new to you. And this is where I'll be so honest, y'all. Please don't cancel me for saying this. I think we kind of up a little bit. I think we managed to pick like the least sexy word possible for something that is like objectively very cool and sexy, which is because come on, like non-binary, I don't know. And I think, again, I think the word non-binary, like something that helps me sort of think about it too, or helps me like explain it to people is like, think about it as like an adjective too. Like you're taking a non-binary look at gender. And it's saying that like, you're not fully a man, you're not fully a woman, whatever. Most people exist within that gray area. There was another like news broadcast from the 80s that I remember listening to at one point too, where they were talking about one of the early pride parades, and they were like, and this was I think this was like ABC or something, and they were like, you know, men, women, and everybody in between. And so I was like, okay, clearly like people understand that. And it, like even growing up in, you know, the early 2000s, before I'd heard the word non-binary, I understood this idea of like, well, there's like a gray area in between two. There's people that don't really fully fit into one or the other. And I think what's happening now is more people are embracing that label who you maybe wouldn't expect to. And I think that's part of where some of the confusion's coming in. And I think we're also like solidifying some of the language about like, you know, pronouns and whatever. Also, I do want to say up front, like I use they, them pronouns. Not every non-binary person like strictly uses they, them pronouns. A lot of people would sort of be like, I'm fine with whatever pronouns. A lot of people use like they, she, they, he. Again, everybody's got a different experience with it. I also know people that are like, you know, use she, they pronouns or he, they pronouns that probably wouldn't call themselves non-binary. They just are like, well, you know, I'm a woman for the most part, but also gender is fake. And yeah, all power to you for that.
Yeah, I think that's amazing because, yeah, we definitely just recently had Raquel on the show, and she was talking about the mere fact that, you know, when, especially when it comes to trans people, but all of this, they've always existed. They've always been here. They will always be here. No matter what happens, no matter what people want to groan on and on about and have a lot of hypocrisy and bigotry, but they've been here and they will always be here. Yeah, and you're right. Growing up, I definitely heard androgynous quite a bit. It was never like fully realized to what that was. Like we knew what that was, but to be a specific identity is like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
And that's such a deep conversation.
Yeah. On that note, like the word androgynous particularly, like one of my best friends growing up was like the first person that I knew that came out as non-binary when we were, I want to say like 18. But even before that in high school, they were experimenting a lot more with like gender expression. And they really latched on the term androgyny and were like talking about how they were very into like androgynous fashion and androgynous presentation and all that. So that was sort of which I thought was interesting because this was a word that kept coming up in all of these interviews and these archives from like the 70s and 80s. So clearly there was sort of like the foundation for that. That was the word that I heard growing up in like, this was like 2014, 2015. And like, so there is a through line there. And that ended up turning into how I understood the idea of being non-binary was. And then kind of on the note about like pronouns, something that I thought was interesting was this idea. Obviously, the whole concept of like asking people for their pronouns and doing, and you're doing introductions, putting your pronouns on your email, all of that is a fairly new thing. However, the fluidity of how people used pronouns, like that is not a new thing either. I mean, something that I learned from working on the show was back in the day, like regardless of whether you identified as like a trans woman or just a genderqueer person or like a gay man, a lot of people were using she, her pronouns for each other, for their friends. It was kind of an inter-community thing. And looking back at that, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Again, it's something that it's situational. It depends on, it has always kind of been a fluid idea. People have always used different pronouns in different situations. We have now sort of put in this system of asking people. And I get that, again, also when that hits like a mainstream sort of expectation, it can be seen differently. But that also, I think, it's not new. It's just the language that we use around how we're like asking people for these things. That's new.
I think we also wanted to put it here because I think it was funny. You and I were talking, and I was like, I will be your Nuna, your Uni, which is a Korean term for older sister. And then I started thinking about it, and you were like, yeah, I think we really need to have this conversation because I had to have an ABC with my mom, and it feels like... I was like, wait, are you saying that I'm like, oh no, okay, but all right, I get it. We need this talk. We need to have this talk. Thank you.
Okay, I did not say that you were reminding me of my mom. I said I had a similar conversation. Yeah,
you did. But I heard, that's what I heard. But you know what? I'm pretty sure that, yes, we definitely need to have this conversation. But as you were saying before, this is about your personal journey. And we're taking a little deeper look, specifically with your experience. So can you kind of talk to us and the listeners about your journey specifically?
Yeah. So, okay. Time to talk about me. Yay. I would say that I identify as non-binary. Honestly, it kind of took me a little while to get to that place. I don't think I would say, and again, this is, my experience. A lot of people have had very different experiences. I wouldn't say that it was like that I always knew that I wasn't a woman or I wasn't a man. I know plenty of people that is kind of their story. They're like, I always sort of felt uncomfortable being one or the other. I didn't really feel like that growing up. I personally, the way that I think about my experience is like, I grew up as a girl. I was socialized as a girl. That really, really impacted the way that I go about the world now. And it's not how I identify anymore, but I see that as like, yes, that is a part of me. Other people, again, don't feel that way. All power to them. Love that. So yeah, I think like growing up, I always was like, yes, I'm a girl, I'm a woman, I'm seen that way, I'm treated that way by society. But also something that I realized sort of as I got older and then reflecting back was girlhood and womanhood. It was always something that felt like a battle. Like it always felt almost kind of painful. And I think the way that I thought about it to myself was, okay, we live in a deeply patriarchal world. It is very hard to come of age as a woman. I'm responding to that. I'm responding to the fact that womanhood is like a very painful experience and like very uncomfortable experience. And I'm not saying that's not the case. Like, obviously, we do live in a very patriarchal world. There's a lot of things that I think, especially, growing up and being like very hypersexualized and, again, this was like the early 2000s, 2010s, like you turn on the TV I don't know. It's like the beauty expectations of like the 2000s was a whole other thing. But like, for me, the biggest sort of, I think, flag looking back that I was like, oh, was like, I remember having like panic attacks over the idea of like having boobs. Like, I was like, I don't know why anybody would want this. This sounds terrible. Like, it ruins your life. And then like talking to friends and being like, oh, you're not having that experience. Like, you actually do want to like experience puberty and like have all of these body changes. Like, you don't just want to be sort of like an androgynous slate for the rest of your life. That's crazy. I literally remember, I'm pretty sure this was Twilight, but I remember watching a movie when I was like 12. Yeah, I think it was Twilight. I remember watching a movie when I was 12, and there was a joke about like one of the characters being like, oh my God, like my boobs are gonna look so good in this dress. And I remember being like physically like, why would you want that? Like, I was like, that sounds terrible. Like, that's just gonna get you like attention that's uncomfortable. And yeah, I think it took me till I was older to sort of realize like, oh, okay, that was not like a universal experience, you know? So yeah, and then I think like the idea of like what it was to be non-binary, I first sort of heard about that when I was like at the end of high school, starting college. And at first I was sort of like, okay, well, that's not me, because the people that I knew that were coming out as non-binary, a lot of them like were like, I don't identify as one or the other. I'm sort of like, I want no gender. I don't identify with one or the other. And I was like, that's not necessarily my experience. So I think like when I was like 16, 17, I sort of interpreted like what I was going through as, I thought that it was because I was gay. And I came out as a lesbian when I was 17. I identified as a lesbian for like the end of my teen years. Before that, I had identified as bisexual. But yeah, I think around when I was 17, I started realizing that I was really uncomfortable with the thought of like having sex with a man or a man looking at me sexually in any kind of way. I think I still was like attracted to men, but it was like the idea of being with a man like freaked me out. So I was like, okay, this is a sign that I'm gay. And then like flash forwarding to when I was 20, that was around when I was really starting to explore my gender identity. I cut my hair for the first time. I was going by different pronouns. I changed my name, all of that. I was presenting a lot more masculine. And I think that was, again, where I sort of came back around and I was like, oh, I actually think I am bi. I am attracted to men. I just was really uncomfortable with the way that like I was seen in a like heterosexual situation. Like the problem literally was like, it wasn't them, it was me. Like it was like, I was like, I don't love what this means, the way that I'm seen in this situation. And from what I've heard, like a lot of people that are not just non-binary, but like trans in general, I think have had similar experiences where they'll identify as like one or the other, and then they'll start transitioning and they'll like realize, you know, some of it is just coming also from like personal discomfort. Obviously, this isn't everybody, but a lot of people have had similar experiences. But yeah, going back to that kind of period of time when I was like ages like 16 to like 19, I knew I was queer. I think I was uncomfortable with the gender binary. But again, I was sort of attributing it to this idea that like, oh, well, it's just like really hard to exist as a woman. You know, I was at that point a very staunch feminist too. And so I was like, again, I was like, the issue is it's the subjectification or blah, 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 whatever. It's all these things. But like ultimately at the end of the day, I think it was an era that was just like defined by me being confused by like some of the things that I thought were universal were not. There was like one instance where I remember like having a conversation with some friends in college, and somebody had like said something about like, oh, well, like if you just woke up and you were like in the body of a man, like how would you? And they all like had this visceral reaction where they're like, oh my God, this would be terrible. And I was like, I feel like that'd be kind of fun. Like, I was like, wait, what? Like, I was like surprised. I was like, oh, you guys don't think about that as like, oh, that could be like a fun experience. I wish I could just go back and forth, like that sort of thing. And, you know, and again, going back to the whole everybody experiences gender differently, I do also know cisgender women that are like, no, I would love that. That would be fun for like a day or two. But, you know, I was surprised by the fact that I was like, oh, my other like girlfriends don't, and a bunch of whom were also, actually, I think in that situation, they were all also queer, which I was like, oh yeah, but like, especially like as queer people, it makes sense that there's like fluidity. I was like, oh, you're not having that same experience. Like you are very comfortable being a woman, being feminine. And I think some of it was me like learning for myself too, like just because I don't find something empowering feels like the wrong word, but I don't find something like affirming or to be a part of who I am doesn't mean it's not the same way for other people. And I think like learning that helped me realize that I was like, something is different. Like I'm experiencing the way that I want to be seen in the world differently than a lot of my friends that are also women or were assigned female at birth. Yeah, and then so when I was 20, I cut my hair short for the first time. This was like literally a year before the pandemic. So I beat everybody else. I changed my pronouns before lockdown, guys. I was ahead of the curve.
Got that haircut in right in time too.
Literally. But I remember like cutting my hair. I was starting to experiment with like my friends. I was sort of like, hey, I think I want to start going by Joey. I would like to use they, them pronouns. And, started slowly at first, was just like with friends, had changed my name on like a couple of my social media, profiles and all of that. I was still going by my first name in school and all of that. So it was like not totally set. But I was like, I'm just going to see how this goes. And yeah, I think that was, again, like the period where I was like, oh, I'm feeling a lot more comfortable existing in this gray area. And so going back to the thing I said before about like when I was kind of ending high school, beginning college, a couple of my friends had come out as non-binary. And I immediately was like, okay, so this is not what I am, because I'm talking to them and they're like, yeah, I don't really feel like I identify as man or woman. I would like to be nothing. And I was sort of like, I feel like I wish I could be like both. Like, I wish I could just sort of like go back and forth between both. Like, I wish I could either be seen as like a very masculine woman or like a very feminine man a lot of the times, honestly. And this is back to what I was saying about everybody experiences it differently. And I think, again, looking at non-binary as more of a like taking a non-binary approach to how we see gender rather than this one specific checkbox of you can either, basically, I think this is what's happened the last couple of years. It feels weird to be complaining about this now that, woke is dead and trans people don't exist anymore and all of that. But I feel like I should be grateful for the few wins that we had for a little bit. But sort of what I think ended up happening was, we got that like third checkbox on the like survey where it would be like, are you a man, are you a woman, are you non-binary? And then what happened was, instead of being like, all right, so non-binary is just like taking a non-binary look at this, it was now we've made a third category. So if you're not, you're either in 1, 2, or 3, instead of being like you're either in 1 or 2 or you're somewhere in the middle. I don't really know how we like, obviously, again, that's a big concept to try and like put into official terms. Like, I don't really know what the answer is, but it was sort of this like check boxification of what it means to be non-binary. It was like putting it into a very small category of this is what it is. And with that, people want a clear, concise definition. And you really can't give it a clear, concise definition. But I think at the end of the day, I think particularly as feminists, thinking about what it means to be non-binary and thinking about having a more expansive idea of gender is like a very, very important part of our understanding of feminism. Because, like, to me, this is sort of almost the end game of like what liberation looks like. Because nobody wants to, like, regardless of whether you're a cisgender man or woman or trans person or non-binary person or whatever, nobody wants to be defined only by their gender. Like, we're all so much more than that. And we live in a world where we have created these really rigid boxes of who you are. And again, it's that checking off the survey box when you're, filling out the little advertisement survey where you're like, I'm ages 20 to 25, or I'm a man, I'm a woman, whatever. And I think, that is kind of like having that be our primary identifier is what your gender is. That is the patriarchy at work. That is the idea that like the gender you were born with is so, so definitive of who you're going to be as a human being. I saw a Tumblr post about this. I know, super serious source point here, but it was talking about the fact that, which I was like, yeah, this also sort of resonates something with me. Like, if you go back 10, 20 years, the idea of, like, gendered sports was a feminist issue. Like, the fact that it was, like, we're saying, hey, like, women are not on the same athletic level as men, like, that is misogyny. And now we've sort of circled back where TERFs have taken this issue and been like, yeah, actually, no, men are so scary and powerful, and you can't have trans people in sports because of that. And it's like, hey, what's happened? Like, we've come back around to now spewing these misogynistic ideas. Like, we've come back around to saying, like, biological determinism, what genitalia you were born with determines the type of person that you're going to be able to be. which it shouldn't. I mean, like, crazy idea. I don't think it should. Regardless, again, if you're a cis woman, a cis man, it's the same situation. This has also come up in things like, you know, the like Oscars when there's like acting awards. Like, why is that gendered? You know, going back to the trans people in sports thing, I think there was like a thing where there was like a trans woman who was banned from like a chess tournament or something, where it's like, at that point, like, what are you saying? You're just saying you think that, you know, people that are born male are somehow so radically different. And then, like, the other thing we've seen from that whole thing is, you know, like with the Olympics last summer, it doesn't just stop at trans women. It's then going to go to anybody that sort of exists outside of the gender binary, regardless of how, like, you know, however you decide to define the gender binary in that case. So, yeah, I think in my mind, the way that I sort of think about this is the concept of taking a like non-binary approach to gender, saying it is not just this one thing or the other, and you can only be one or the other. Really owning into this idea that everybody knows themselves best, right? Like, everybody knows what's best for themselves. It is an idea of bodily autonomy. It is an idea of like self-determination. I think at the end of the day, if we want to create a world that is more just and, you know, not violently, terribly, awfully misogynistic, you need to acknowledge the fact that, yeah, like, this gender binary should not be as strict as it is. It should not really be there to begin with. I don't want anybody to see me and have like the main thing they're thinking about being like, they're non-binary, they, them, I have to blah, 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 blah. I, like, my existence is so much more than that. To me, it is saying, like, I don't want to be defined by manhood or by womanhood. I want to be defined by, you know, who I am as a person, who I am. And I think, like, that is something that a lot of people in my generation have kind of leaned into when it comes to gender identity. I keep thinking about, there was literally, there was a lie. First of all, I saw there was like an Instagram post I saw that was like, it's like the 20-year anniversary of the bisexuality episode of Sex and the City, where they were like ranking all the characters based on like how much bi energy they have. But I was thinking about, there was like a line that Samantha has in it where she's like, I think in the future, like, it's not going to be like about sleeping with men and sleeping with women. It's going to be about like sleeping with individuals. And I was like, yeah, like that is kind of what, like, at least for me, in my bubble, in my Gen Z bubble of people, like, I think that is how we're trying to reframe that. It's like, you know, regardless, in this case, we're talking about personal identity rather than attraction, but it is like, people just want to be seen as individuals, as people. They don't want it to... The goal of feminism is equality. The goal of feminism is for us all to be treated similarly. And part of that is understanding, like, we don't even really need these clear-cut definitions of what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman. Because, like, who does that help at the end of the day? That helps the patriarchy. That's the answer.
For sure. There's definitely such a depth in this conversation because you had a whole philosophical level of like, but I don't know why I have to be this, but I don't think I'm this because I don't feel this way. And it's so real. That's the understanding that you have to unlearn so much of the misogyny and the patriarchy that you realize how deep it goes into your identity and trying to unlearn those. And that's for any individual who may not have that moment of like, oh, wait, I may be gay, I might be trans, I may be this, that, or that. That's just the whole level of unlearning.
I think a big thing for me, that idea of like unlearning too, was realizing, and this is kind of what I was getting into with that story, was like, or talking about, you know, growing up and all these things. I think realizing I don't have the same experiences as everybody else. And that's like, that's not a bad thing. Like, that's good. But it's also like, it's realizing that something that can feel like right and can feel like authentic for someone else, I might see that and be like, thinking about myself. I'm bringing up this topic. I'm not getting into the obvious debate that is happening online. Sabrina Carpenter was a great example for me. There was when she first like came on the scene, I was sort of like, I don't like, that is a version of femininity. If you put me in that, I would be deeply uncomfortable. I would be like, I hate this. This is not me. This is weird. This is demeaning to me. I don't like it. Realizing that a lot of my friends saw that and were like, no, that's a version of femininity that like I really feel comfortable in. I really feel like it reflects my gender expression. I was like, oh, okay, cool. That's like, I love that for you. It's a different experience for me. Like being able to separate what is my truth versus what is other people's version of that. We all have different experiences. We're all coming back to that. Like that's the point I'm coming back to in the end, I guess. I think especially too, something for me is like I consider myself a transmasculine person too. I honestly like my expression. I lean a lot more on the masculine side. I haven't done anything to physically transition yet. I might down the way. I don't know yet. I have friends that are kind of like, since one of my roommates, I always like joke about how I'm like, we're doing like, we're like the two cars passing each other and like being like, what are you doing here? Because like they're like a trans feminine non-binary person. We had like a conversation a couple weeks ago where we were talking about our experiences. We had like a very, very similar experience, sort of again going in opposite directions, which was a little bit funny, but also like talking to them and like hearing how like exploring their femininity has been very empowering and has been very, and like getting to see them really turn into this like person that, you know, they seem so much more confident. They seem so much more like actualized in this identity and being like, that's amazing. I love that that's empowering for you. I love that that's you leaning into your, like, if I did that, it would be, I would hate it. I would not be having a good time. But then, yeah. And then I think that also helps me then communicate to like, you know, I grew up a feminine. I grew up as somebody who is like seen as by society as a girl. I grew up as a staunch feminist. I was raised by like a mom who was very, very feminist. I think being able to also communicate why like I can still be a feminist. I can still be supportive of femininity and like not saying that masculinity is like better than femininity inherently, but also realizing there's a lot of things about femininity that I am not comfortable with, that I don't like for myself. You know, I love it for other people. I don't love it for myself.
Well, we appreciate you coming on and talking about this because I always feel you keep hammering home the point. Everybody's different. Everybody's an individual, and having a like 101 is very tricky, and especially when the experiences can differ so vastly. And one of the things that you brought up that I've also run into, which I've always known, but sometimes it can be very shocking, is that I also have a bubble.
Yeah.
And sometimes I leave that bubble. And even with people, I'm like, I feel like we're generally on the same page, and they don't know the difference between like, they couldn't tell me what like gender identity even is. They don't know what that is. And so, you know, I'll like sit down and try to explain it to them, but it's just really interesting when you kind of step outside of the people who really are in the same world as you. But that being said, what are some things that you wish people knew when it comes to identifying as non-binary?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is like kind of what I was saying on the top. This is not a new idea. I think the language is new. The way that we were discussing it is new, but it's not a new idea. I love to point to the, you know, anecdote about how I think it was, I can't remember when this happened, but sometime in like the early 20th century, they stopped teaching kids that you can only write with your right hand. Like they were letting kids actually learn how to be lefties if they were lefties. And like all of a sudden the number of lefties like shot up. Like all of a sudden there were all these kids that were left-handed. And it was like, it wasn't like there was necessarily something that made more people lefties. It was just that they were stopping punishing that, you know. It's people have used that a lot. I mean, people have talked about that with, you know, talking about like the way that we talk about like autism diagnosis and stuff like that. We talk about like queer people, the way we talk about or like neurodivergency in general. There's all these different things. The way people talk about, you know, a lot of this isn't new. I think the reason you're seeing like it might seem, you know, from the outside, like it's like, oh, it's this Gen Z thing that all of these young kids are hopping on this trend. This is the result of decades of people fighting for more gender equality, of fighting for more bodily autonomy, of fighting for more, you know, queer liberation. More people are admitting that. You see older folks now that are coming out as trans or as non-binary as adults because they just were never given that room to explore that as a child. Again, I think like for me, I always kind of, again, I don't think I always knew I was like not a woman, not a man, but I always sort of knew there was something that was different about me. I didn't have the words for it until I was older. So yeah, this is not new. The way that we're talking about it is new. every person can point to somebody in their life that they were like, they're not necessarily like on one or the other end of the gender binary. Just because they weren't calling them non-binary at the time doesn't mean that that was not like, you know, that they were not a real actualized person. I think the next thing too, and this is something that always bugs me, y'all, like, we're not that sensitive. You can chill out a little bit. I think this happens with like a lot of queer stuff in general, where there's this idea of like, oh my God, like, well, I can't offend like anybody. Most people understand like it might take a sec to adjust to new pronouns or like whatever. For me, it is like intent. Intent is the thing that matters. If you are really trying to work at changing the way that you're talking about somebody, if you're really like working at, you know, addressing somebody in the way, it's about respect. Like at the end of the day, the way, like when we're talking about pronouns, we're talking about names and stuff like that. It's about showing respect for somebody and saying, okay, like I'm acknowledging that I'm treating you the way that you would like to be seen. Nobody's going to freak out at you if you don't get it right away. If somebody does, I'm sorry, that's their problem. That's not like, that's not a reflection on the rest of us. That doesn't mean don't try, but also like, yeah, there is room for, you know, if you're confused, that's fine. There's lots of things that are confused. Again, the thing that I keep saying, everybody's got different experiences. I'm not going to pretend like I fully understand. I don't know what it's like to be a trans woman. You know, I'm not going to stand here and be like, I'm not going to be mad because I'm like, I don't necessarily know what that experience is like or what's going to be comfortable or whatever. Or if I'm going to say this thing and it's going to be blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to be like, well, that's just too complicated and I can't deal with it and you're the problem. Like, I'm like, no, teach me. That's part of being a human being is learning. So again, I don't know, but I don't know where this idea, it's very much like it's the right wing, like, oh, you can't say anything these days. Like everybody's a snowflake. No, most people understand that it's like, I don't know, people make mistakes. Things change. I don't know. One of the best sort of things that I heard was like, okay, if you can be confused by it and still like respect people's ability to like express their own bodily autonomy, right? Like you can be like, I don't totally understand this, but I support your right to self-determination or whatever. I think like if you're still confused by this idea, I think just literally thinking about that like checkboxification, quote unquote, that I keep talking about, like the way that we think about it is if you're like, yeah, if you're man, woman, non-binary, these three options, like just get that out of your head, like destroy that. It is not a third option. It is a looking at this binary and being like, hey, there is all this space in between. There is all this space in between. It is all fluid. It is all people go back and forth, people, whatever. It is looking at the idea of how we think about gender in our world right now and saying, hey, maybe it's not as set in stone as we were told it is. And again, that's why I think I keep coming back to this is ultimately like a feminist issue. This is ultimately an issue of people having the right to their own bodily autonomy, people having the right to define who they are, people having the right to express that in the way that feels comfortable for them. And then, like, at the end of the day, like, who really cares? Like, is it really bothering you if somebody is using they, them pronouns? Like, I'm sorry it's an adjustment, but, like, I don't know. I'm from Chicago. I grew up calling the Sears Tower, it's the Willis Tower now. I grew up calling it the Sears Tower. Nobody, like, in the media was like, oh, well, you know, we don't know what to call it. What are the, like, things change names all the time. It's not, like, again, at the end of the day, why it's not bothering you. It's not bothering you what other people do. It's not bothering you if somebody gets a tattoo and you don't like tattoos, or if they get a piercing. It shouldn't bother you if somebody decides they want to go by different pronouns.
But bother them it does.
Bother them it does. I get it, guys.
So do the tattoos and the piercing.
I was saying, you know,
it shouldn't,
there are many things,
but it does. Oh, I think it's just like, you know, we all know, but I think it's that idea of like this change isn't somehow encroaching on my beliefs and it's making me uncomfortable, and heaven forbid I have to take like an extra second and like think about this.
I feel like the people that complain the most too are the people that it's like you don't actually know like a single trans person. Yeah. Again, that's why I keep going back to. I'm like, we're not. Everybody wants to pretend like, oh, well, y'all are so sensitive, y'all like are gonna jump at any. And I'm like, have you talked to a single non-binary person? Like, I don't know anybody that would. Most people I know like there was some comedian that there was like a stand-up bit that was going around that they were talking about where they were like, yeah, my pronouns are they, them, or she, her, unless somebody uses that because like I'm bad at confrontation or whatever. Like, which I was like, yeah, no, I was like, what's the non-binary? I mean, I don't know. That also just my social circles. I'm like, most people I know are like pretty non-confrontational people who are probably going to be like, oh yeah, whatever, sure.
Let it go, move on. You're like,
let it go, move on.
All right, we're just gonna keep going with this. I feel like you've already addressed, because we were talking on the next one of the other things I would be like, what are some things that annoy you? I feel like we touched onto that when it comes to the non-binary. When people talk about non-binary folks in general. Anything else to add?
I mean, I think like what I said again. It's the just because language is new doesn't mean the concepts are new. And then also, it really isn't that big of a deal. It really is not like, at the end of the day, it's about somebody's individual experience. And it has nothing to do with you. Like, it has nothing to do with you. I think these are conversations people should have. I think even if you are somebody who identifies as like cisgender, I think, yeah, exploring gender identity, and even if you come out of that and you still identify as cisgender, like we all could benefit from thinking about the way that we think about our own gender and thinking about the ways that the idea of gender and the gender binary sort of shapes how we view the world. I think that is healthy for everybody to think about that. I think at the end of I think these are important conversations to have because of that. I think it is part of feminist liberation. It's part of queer liberation. It is part of just personal learning who you are. Because, yeah, nobody, like I said, nobody wants to be defined solely by their gender. I mean, maybe somebody, I don't know, maybe the like trad wives on TikTok or something, but, you know, give them a couple of years, I guess. Maybe they'll have an awakening. Who's to say? I don't know.
They do. I mean, it's very important to realize, just like you were saying, that this shouldn't be a big deal. Everybody should be able to be who they are without it being like you being like the
proverbial,
making it a big deal. Just existing. Most trans people would rather just be there and be able to quietly change into who they felt like they were meant to be without people making it a big deal, without people making it a big part of their identity, unless they want to, because they want to use it for activism, stuff like that. I think about that all the time as an Asian, as a Korean person. Oftentimes, that's the only thing they see. That's my identifier. And you're like, why can't I just exist? And the same thing for like just in general for women and feminists who are like, we don't want this separate category. Honestly, we just want to be seen as equal and be treated as equal and get equal pay, all those things. And it doesn't want to be a big deal. We don't want it to be a special category if you treated us equally. Like there's this level of understanding that if society, if the patriarchy did not exist or existed into where the matriarch was just as much an equal factor in conversation, then it would be wonderful. I would rather be ignored as this and be seen as talent. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, there's so much in that conversation, and normalizing these conversations where it's not a big deal. So we have the younger generations who are trying to figure themselves out, not feel the struggle and internal turmoil of like, am I sinning, in that level of like, or have I like ruined society and my family if I come out as any of these other factors that I was told was not the stereotypical way to be. Like that would be beautiful, where just like if a child was able to be like, oh yeah, I am attracted to by same sex. That's great. Moving on. Like being able to have breakfast and then saying, I'm maybe not. Maybe I'm attracted to all, any, both, whatever, whatnot. And not having to feel like they have to fight against that because somehow they're wrong.
I think going off of that, like, I always kind of say, I never wanted the fact that I was queer or the fact that I was non-binary or whatever to be a big deal. I didn't want to have to talk about it. I am somebody who like works in a like queer media space right now. The reason for that is because we live in a deeply homophobic, transphobic, et cetera, world. I have to talk about it. I would love if I could just be like, these are my pronouns, this is what I want to do, whatever, end of the day. But I keep having to justify it to other people. And so I've kind of learned how to, like, you know, have that be part of the things that I talk about. Yeah, I think I mentioned I had written something around trans day visibility about this. And something that I think I compared it to was in high school, I was really involved with a lot of like student film stuff. And there were a couple different instances where like I was the only like girl on set. And, you know, like, I think that was an experience where I remember like being very vocal about like women in film and like needing more women in film. But at the same time, I never wanted the fact that I was like, I would show up to this student film set, I would be the only girl. I didn't want people to think about that. Like, I didn't want people to like look at me and be like, the token girl is here, like whatever. And I think it's the same thing with gender identity, where I was like, I don't want the first thing that people think about. Like, I don't want it to be the thing that stand out to be like, oh, well, they're non-binary, they're trans, whatever. I don't want it to have to be a thing that I have to think about, that I have to worry about how that's impacting how other people are seeing me. I just want to be. I think, like, similar to what you said, I don't want the separate category. I just want to be. Growing up, I was really into like Riot Girl music growing up. Shocker. And I loved like Sleater Kinney. And there was an interview, I think, with Carrie Brownstein about like where she was talking about how like frustrating it was being interviewed and constantly being asked like about being like a girl rock group instead of just being asked about like being a rock group and like being one of the biggest like rock bands at the time. But they were constantly put in this category of like, but you guys are like a girl rock group. Nobody wants that. Right. Again, even if you're cisgender, nobody wants to be solely defined as this thing that makes them different.
Absolutely. I think many of us can attest to that. Anney, you can attest to that. That's kind of how you started with this show.
Yeah. I wanted to be on the science show, and they were like, but you're the lady, so you're the
you
one
talk
we
about
have.
Girl stuff, literally.
You go to the feminist podcast, which I'm glad I did, but I just remember being like, okay.
Right? Like, sometimes I feel like kind of a like hypocrite because I'm like, and I do work on like the iHeart like queer slate of shows. I do talk a lot about these, but I'm like, but I don't want other people to have to do it. Like, I'm kind of doing it because like, I don't shut up, and I don't know. Like, I was like, you know what, I might as well. But I don't want this to be the only option, you know?
Right. You have become a leader now in this kind of conversation, an advocate in this. So what advice would you give to others who are maybe starting their own journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think, oh, thank you. I don't know if I'd call myself a leader, but
yes.
I was like,
all right, you are.
Oh, thank you. And I think like at the end of the day, like I said, I think regardless of whether, if you come out of this and you're like, actually, I think I'm cisgender, I think it is healthy for everybody to think a little bit about gender identity and question their own gender identity. I think that's healthy. At the end of the day, like, you are the only one that gets to define who you are. And like, that might seem cliche, but like it genuinely is very hard. I mean, it took me a very long time to be open about this. Again, because like I wanted short hair my entire life. I didn't cut my hair until I was 20 because I was just always told like I was going to look ugly. It was going to be bad. It was like a terrible decision. I shouldn't do that. And then I cut my hair and I was like, wow, I like literally something that small made such a huge difference in my life. You are the only one that really knows you. I think also something that really, really helped me was finding, and again, not everybody has this option, but finding, if you can, like find other queer and trans people to like have in your life to talk to about these things. That made so much difference because I think, again, like a lot of my friends that originally come out, I had very different experiences from them, but also I think talking to them and hearing about their experiences helped me figure out my own. I think at the end of the day, like, talking to my, again, like I said, talking to my cis friends about these things and finding out that their experience was drastically different than mine helped me also realize I was like, oh, a lot of the things that I'm like there was a very long time where I was like, womanhood is just pain. Like, it is just pain. Like, that is it. And I was like, oh, like that actually is not feminist. That's just me torturing myself at the end of the day. And, so yeah, I think have these conversations if you can. It is hard. I mean, I didn't, like, I knew a couple of queer people growing up in high school, but most of my early sort of exposure to the queer community was online, was through, you know, things like Tumblr. I think it's a double-edged sword because I literally, before recording, opened up TikTok and there was, you know, the latest round of whatever stupid Pride Month discourse. Don't get caught up in the distractions. That's all I'm going to say. You know what? It's also, don't police other people's identity while you're figuring out your own. There's a way to figure out your own identity while not getting too entangled with worrying about what other people are doing. But yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's your life. It's your life, and you should be able to determine what makes you like the truest, happiest version of yourself. And also, I mean, this is obviously, and like I've alluded to this, it's a weird time to be talking about this. I feel weird even complaining about the like putting the little non-binary check box because it's like, well, now we don't even have that anymore. But also, like, things are bad right now. We've gotten through some of the worst. Like, we as the queer community have gotten through, like, within my parents' lifetimes, within my lifetime, because technically sodomy was illegal in Texas until like 2003. Within my life, like, it was literally illegal to be gay. Like, people have survived, people have persisted. I think, like, find your community, find your little bubble, your enclave. Just because the worst, most awful people are, like, in positions of power right now and making those opinions loud. Humanity, at the end of the day, I think humanity is good. I think most people are good. I think most people are willing to change their minds about things. I think, like, you know, we literally, like, studies have shown when people, like, know people in their life that are trans, it changes their perspective on the trans community. People care about each other. So don't also, like, I wouldn't lose hope right now that this is just going to be all there is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good message. And I'm so glad we got to have you on before Pride ended. Because we've been trying to make this happen for years.
Oh my God, yes. Yeah, sorry. I also kept pushing it back. It has been insanely hot in New York. Today is the first day it's, like, kind of back to normal, but it's been, like, in the 90s in New York for, like, the past 2 weeks. Same in Chicago. I was in Chicago last weekend. It was, I don't know.
It's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Yes. Well, you also, we kind of mentioned, I don't know if we said specifics because we just count Raquel as our friend now.
Yeah.
But Raquel is the host of the show that you work on, Afterlives.
Yes.
As mentioned.
Afterlives, Marsha P. Johnson, out now wherever you get your podcasts. At least the first 3 episodes are out. I don't know when the 4th episode might be out by the time this drops. We'll see, I guess. But please give it a listen. I think, like, kind of going back to what I was saying, I'm a big history buff. I think, like, when things are weird, when stuff is, you know, the way it is right now, I think it is important to look to history and look to, you know, our ancestors and see, like, how they survived. Like, see the things they survived, see the, like, things that they overcame. So I would give that a listen. You get into some of those queer elder interviews that I was mentioning before. Again, fun discussions on the way that, yeah, we've always kind of been here. There were a couple people that we interviewed who I think, like, they more or less identified as non-binary. They would have said it in different terms because, again, it's the language has changed, but I was like, oh, I'm hearing you talk about your experience and I'm seeing my own reflected in that. Like, I've had, like, we have always been here. And I think history is a great way to kind of remind ourselves of that. So anyways, listen to Afterlives, Marsha P. Johnson. Yay!
Yes, yes, absolutely. And thank you, because you helped set up that interview with Raquel.
Of course.
So thank you.
Oh my God, yeah.
Thank you, Joey. Well, where else can the good listeners find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. I have that piece I keep referencing that I wrote on my Instagram. That is at Pat Not Pratt. That is PATTNOTPRATT. People get my last name wrong a lot. Can find me there. That's also my Twitter, but I don't really use that much lately. And yeah, check out Afterlives. You can also listen to There Are No Girls on the Internet, which is with another friend of the show, Bridget Todd. I also work on that one. But yeah.
Yes, and past episodes over here.
Yes, and past
stuff
episodes,
I'll never told you.
And I'll be back. I'll do more
I'm
I
sure we
need to
have
do a
some
new,
fiction stuff, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I need to come back on and do a fun, like, superhero one.
We haven't done our Twilight wrap up.
Oh
We have
my
to do
God.
that. And then we
need to
also
do
need to
that.
bring you back on for Sex and the City because we're
Yes.
still on that as well. And I love that
We
you
do.
have attached to that. It makes me very happy.
I did binge the entire show after watching, like, one episode
Love
with you
that so
guys and
much.
was like, that, honestly, I loved it. Like, I watched it last summer and it was like, I needed that. It's great. I did also recently watch the movie, like, for the first time.
You watched the movie?
That was like, so much happened. That was just, I like literally, like, there were multiple points in the movie where I was like, oh, it's the end. It's almost over. And I would like click on the thing and be like, we are 20 minutes in. There's so much happens. They don't make movies like that anymore.
Oh, that's exciting.
Oh man.
Oh, well, I cannot wait for one.
Yes. I'm excited for this.
I am kind of on that note too. I know the reboot has like a really awful like attempt to try to do like non-binary stuff or whatever, or like have like I'm kind of like morbidly tempted to watch it and just see how bad it is.
I think you should because it's a whole thing, and I don't know what the new seasons are like.
Yeah,
and just like that, we watched the first season, and I was like, huh.
Interesting. All I know is there's a guy that I went to college with who has like a small role in it. And I only know this because I still follow him on Instagram from like the one class we took together. And he keeps posting about it. And I'm like, wait, like that's, anyways, I don't know. It's so weird to see like people that I like.
That is interesting.
I don't know. Yeah. Anyways, that's a whole
They're
other story.
still out there alive,
yeah,
you know?
I was like, wow. I was like, you're actually doing things. That's crazy.
But also, Joey, Carrie is a podcaster in the new
Oh my God,
shows.
really?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
but it's like a
twist.
live
Okay,
call-in
good.
podcast.
So it's a radio show.
Yes. Oh,
But
yes.
she says it's a podcast. They say it's a podcast. But you have to, just go take a chance.
Interesting. Okay, I'll check it out.
You know.
Yeah. Well,
okay. That's for later.
many, many things to come back and discuss, Joey. We always love having you. Thank you so much for coming on. We know this was a big, like, can you come on?
Oh
and
my
explain
God, no,
this?
of course. Yeah. Happy to, thanks for letting me ramble for an hour.
Always. Love it. Till next time.
Till next time.
But in the meantime, listeners, you can contact us if you would like. You can email us at hello@stuffInevertoldyou.com. You can find us on Blue Sky, at Mom Stuff Podcast, or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff I Never Told You. We're also on YouTube, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production by iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.